All right, so I know we have Connecticut on, Mississippi, I think I saw Andy on.
Texas.
California's on, Maryland's on, Texas is on. It looks like we might just be missing Virginia.
Nope, Virginia's on, just not on the Zoom call.
Oh, okay. Hello. Hi, Eric.
Hi, Eric.
Hi, how are you?
Good. All right, so I think we're ready.
Okay. All right. I'm going to kick us off and tell you I'm going to give you the gift of time back, as Joan likes to say at the end of some of our meetings when we finish earlier than expected. We have a lot of moving parts right now going on in the implementation, and we'll cover some of that today. But this is hopefully going to be a quick update, so you guys, we want to make sure you guys know where we are in the process. First and foremost, we've had pretty much the meetings, and Lori will go over a little bit of this with the sign-ons. Understand that was to start getting you familiar with the process. There's going to be a lot of work that has to be done toward this. Some of the calls that I've been on are generally questions involving or moving toward how do we know, how do we kind of get reports that give us some indication or some idea about the validity of the process, the validity of the data. And I would say that in this, and I think Truman will cover this, but with this scope, that's not necessarily the, what will be proven in this, but that, that the functionality can work in this use case. And then if we decide and it's kind of declared a success, which I really, I think will happen, then we'll move toward, as we expand or as we look toward openIDL or distributed ledger technology being the way we do data calls in the future, that we will, we'll need, that's when it will become really critical that the states that have participated start to see and give guidance on the other types of outputs you'll want to see around stability and accessibility of the data. So that part will still need to be built. So it's important. I think that's probably why we made the decision to go ahead and introduce some of the technology as far as just starting to get comfortable with the screens and the web interface, because there's going to be a lot of work that will need to be done afterwards on the rules that govern the community. So with that, I'm going to hand us over to Lori very quickly to talk a little bit about the participation levels with that, and then Truman is going to speak to where we are with the companies and what we're doing, what's actually happening in the technology side of it, and then we'll open up for some questions. Lori, you want to give a quick update?
And I also just wanted to mention Hartford and Travelers are also on the call, so thanks for joining us today. So over the last 3 weeks, we have been meeting individually with each of your states. We introduced you to your logins and to your home pages. I know Truman went in yesterday and he saw that a few of you have gone in and actually played around, and he's going to touch more on that when he gets up after me. But, we basically wanted to get you familiar with what's happening and how you can access the system. Those have gone very well. We've done every state except Eric. We have not done Virginia yet. And I know you were waiting to see if there was going to be one other person joining you in Virginia, but if we need to get that set up. And I think the next phase of these calls then would be in the next maybe couple weeks, once Truman kind of talks to you about getting a template set up in there for you. We'll set up another set of calls with you all to kind of introduce you to that and to get you in there working, because I still kind of feel like, especially some of you who just is you're joining us for the first time doing openIDL, you didn't attend any of the design thinking or working sessions, that you're going to need a little bit more guidance from us. So we're going to work with you in making sure that you're very comfortable getting in the system. And have any of you had any difficulties logging in, or have all of you tried your logins?
Hi, this is Leo from California. I did try to log in. The interface is great. very intuitive. I was sorry about that, Truman. I wasn't able to do it till this morning, but what I did was I just followed the screenshots. I mean, the screen instructions there. It's what we see from California is our data calls are pretty, we have a standard format for that. The interface, it seems to fit in really well with what we have. There's a purpose section for it, eligibility requirements there. What I'd like to see, obviously, you know, some of the stat plans or instructions moving forward. I mean, I'm with you guys in terms of, you know, where we're headed here, but oh, you got it up. Great. Thank you. And so moving forward.
My example this morning, Leo, I appreciate it.
I apologize. I'm in the middle of trying to fill a couple vacancies and it's just getting ridiculous. But getting back, I really like it with regards to, you know, what we have, for example, with the stat plan. You know, I used the COVID one here, but then we've got a whole host of other ones that I wish you were around when we did it. Like, for example, the wildfires. That's something we see that could have been picked up really quickly and done very seamlessly here, from what I understand. And then moving forward long term, I mean, you've got our more detailed data calls like the auto liability, physical damage. It's something that's giving me a headache in terms of a manager, in terms of just the collection portion of it. And if this, you know, can be a way to collect the data a lot quicker, I think it would reduce costs, not just for the department, but for companies. And we could find ways to work with companies once we know that that they submit the data on time, right? And then we can work with them on the validation portion of it. But then that's another issue moving forward. Just from California side of it, we like what we see. And I've communicated that with our people up here.
Thanks, Leo. So as Leo said, we've gotten a lot of the feedback that you're providing from the other states as well. And at the end of this call, I think we're going to give you all kind of a chance to talk and give us some feedback and maybe what you like and what you don't like, and we'll move on from there. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Truman to get you into the weeds of it.
Well, thanks. And again, Leo, appreciate you getting in there and doing that. Like I said, we'll use an example this morning of what we'd like regulators, now that you've got access to the system, got the quick intro. And as Lori mentioned, the next round of meetings we'd like to do is to really walk through doing much of what Leo just did, and then actually leveraging the work that each of you are doing. So this is a data call that, as you mentioned, based on the COVID-19 data call that we have out there. You can look at that and see how it works. You can see as different revisions are made. And I'm logged in here as George from Connecticut. So if this looks good to me, I can now take this and clone it and see exactly what's there. Obviously, it changes my jurisdiction to Connecticut, and then I could change this to CT, and then I could put maybe CA in there just to note that it's been copied from that, and then go through here and make the requisite updates, and then start to copy those or start to make the language more per state, much like we have the extraction pattern. So it's something that could be replicated much more cleanly state to state as we go through the different definitions. Look and see, start to build the next one. You want to start to see what happens March 1st and, through the end of March, and then April, and then June, for example, different data calls by different loss period dates. And where you were going, Leo, is exactly the right, exactly the next step where you start to get into it. Once you create one, then you start immediately thinking what the next question is, what's the follow-up question, and what's the other things that are really important to California, maybe not as important, in Maryland, but the pattern is the same. And what as most of the introductory calls that we had, we're already seeing some of the follow-on questions that we'd have that may not be related to COVID necessarily, but is related to business interruption around a different cause of loss, maybe physical damage from the civil unrest, for example. Most of that data is there. If we ask for it for that month of June, for example, we might see some different trends with different causes of loss, but the data is already going to be there from the carrier. So you'll be able to get much more up to date and quality data, so that you can get an idea of what's going on, in a much more timely fashion than you have been able to in the past, in collaboration with the industry. So let me change gears on that, but that's the kind of the next step. So thanks, Leo, for getting in there and doing that. So I'll spare you going in and making the specific updates, but I'll go ahead and save this as a draft in Connecticut, so kind of give George a head start here. If that one is that you wanted to to leverage. But that's exactly what we'd be looking at for the regulators be doing at this point, is looking at what each of you is creating, modifying and improving it to make it more consistent across the states to answer the general purpose, and then also modifying it to make it more specific to a state as it impacts your state. More particularly, maybe you need to get more detailed data around farms or dairies or retail distribution or something than another state. More ports, for example. So that's what we've been doing on the UI side. Let me change gears real quick and recap of where we are on the carrier side. But while I'm doing that, please, if there's any questions, or let me know, and we can address them now, and then I'll tell you where we are with the carriers. Hearing none. Okay, so just a quick recap of what we're building here and what we're looking to deploy in this first phase of the COVID-19 business interruption openIDL data call response is what we call the Regulatory Reporting Data Network, which will have AIS as the multi-tenant node. Travelers and the Hartford have the nodes that are out there, and then we're standing up additional nodes for other carriers as they come on board. Quick high level of the process and the current relative to the current state of regulatory reporting is that each carrier will load data into their own peer on the network. That data is resident on that network. It is secure. It is according to a standard format. So while nobody can see the data but each carrier, that data is in a consistent schema of the data as at rest in that harmonized data store. As regulators, as you prepare and issue those data calls, those are presented, as we just saw, in the same interface to the carriers, where they can review the data call, see what you're asking, see the actual code that will execute against their data, and agree to participate. When the time comes, that code, the extraction pattern, as we saw, is executed, and their data is retrieved and transparently and automatically brought together to AIS on that peer the same peer that you're creating the data calls on, and then that data passes additional quality checks. Something we've talked with each of you about is how that data can be trusted, or how far, what the quality metric is and where those quality checks are performed, so that when the data is ultimately delivered to the interface, how far you can trust it. And the bar today is relatively low, but we can provide and are executing thousands of tests to make sure that it is as clean as we can make it. And in the future, as that data is leveraged for more purposes than other than just the COVID-19 data call or data calls in general, you'll have much more perspective on the general quality of the data, because it's being relied on for multiple purposes. So that's the high level. So let me tell you where we're going. Quick update on where we are with the carriers being invited and onboarding to the platform. The technical platform is deployed. We have the nodes out there, and we are actively onboarding the carriers and their different resources to the different aspects of the system. We are also continuing development and some broader hardening issues to allow for experience improvements, faster onboarding, some additional tools to allow data loading easier, some of the user management sorts of things there. And then with each company, and this is really the kind of the long tent in the pole for companies coming on board to openIDL for the first time, is working through the IT and security due diligence for a production system. This is an enterprise software solution and network that carriers are putting production detailed data onto on a regular basis, and we are going through a detailed due diligence process that is required in any company in this regulated industry, with detailed audits for security, privacy, and then as we get more mature into the continuity and the broader integrity of the system. But it's a large enterprise hurdle that we are overcoming. The nice thing is, once that hurdle is overcome, the opportunity to prepare the node to answer all the questions that you have, as you mentioned, around wildfires and other things. Once we clear that gate, carriers have the opportunity to load not only data for the states that are requesting these data calls, but loading data countrywide, not only for the first 3 months, but also April, May, and June. Also, not just the commercial lines, but potentially other lines of business as well. Where we talk home, auto, and we know there's going to be some auto data calls coming related to the COVID-19 changes, for example, all that data can be brought in as soon as we clear this IT gate, so we can actually start moving much more quickly. But of course, get more data in there. Really quickly, what we're doing with each company is walking them down trying to accomplish these different milestones. Getting nodes online, as we mentioned, those are there. State Farm, Travelers in Hartford have agreed, as you know. State Farm has said not yet, they'll remain in conversations. So Travelers in Hartford's node is online. Access is in process with the Hartford. Travelers has access, and actually on Friday, ring the bell, they uploaded the first test data set into their node from their access. So while it was a single record, we're not done yet. We have demonstrated the process that we can start to move forward with more quickly. At that point, we are now kind of dual tracked with the deeper understanding of the data, preparing the more granular data to be brought into the node and understanding what's coming there, using the ETL process or extract, transform, load process, getting data into openIDL. And then the parallel track is the security diligence, where we're getting the node cleared for operations within the enterprise environment. Once those happen, once those two things are done, we will be prepared to load live data onto that node. Then the carrier can perform their own quality checks and can start at that point. Actually, they could consent to a data call before, but at that point, they will be ready to respond to a live data call. And then when the data call fires, we'll be able to verify that the data was received by each of those participants. So that's where we're going. We're looking for a lot of filled in the dots on this race. We do note that the Hartford, we're continuing the access and working through a diverse teams on their side, but they have done the security diligence last side, so they already have cleared one of the hurdles already. It'll just be an update to how it's exactly being used here. That should be a smaller project there. We are, as we've talked with each of you, we are looking at each of the jurisdictions to find additional participants that would help provide different benefits to you as a state as well as to carriers. The first thing we're looking at is what we call kind of the third leg of the stool. With the Hartford and Travelers and most of the states participating, that provides a broad data set that could provide sound insight into what's happening in the market. But because there's only two carriers, the big value proposition that we're looking to deliver back to the industry to make this process valuable to all participants, we need that third carrier to help provide a broader data set that can be reflected back to the industry. When only two carriers, they can obviously track their own data and de-identify the other. But with a third player at least a course level, that would give the opportunity to obscure the individual participants as well as providing more detailed information into the highways and the byways of what's going on in your jurisdiction. That is my update at this point. Any questions? And then certainly we'd ask that, if there's any particular carriers or data pools that exist in your state, to let us know, and we'll see if there's a way that we can incorporate them into this POC, not only on the carrier side, but also in prospective sides. Something we've mentioned with you is perhaps permit offices, small business administrations within the state, for example, or even revenue sources, to get an idea of how well the how large the broader market is and how well the industry is able to accommodate it. With that, I will stop and take questions and hand it back to Robin.
Okay. Well, I'm not seeing anybody pop up, but the long and the short for us, I think, is that I'm always anxious for what are we doing now. The security protocols and the things that we have to get through in the larger companies that's a very good thing. In other words, now they are actually doing what they told you they would do when they with the new Model Act or Model Law. A lot of these companies obviously already had security in set, but this is a good example of how it's working. We're already pretty confident that once we hit the data load option, when we get that data in there, you're going to have some ability to really go beyond just the COVID call, but to start asking other questions and prove out the value of the system. And I believe that will happen certainly quicker than the end of the year, and the finalization of the data calls from the NAIC data call. So right now, while, I always want faster, but, I think we're in a very good place. I think that you know, Hartford and Travelers have been amazing partners in this, and we'd like to thank them certainly on this call for standing up and saying, yes, they'll do this, and having champions within their organization to move this forward. This is not easy to especially the large, it's still a large project inside of the walls of these companies, especially at a time when they're trying to address a lot of other things going on inside of their company. So again, thank you to those teams, because they will have been leaders in proving the success of this, and we hope that we can give them, you know, every bit as much value back in openIDL as the proposition is to give the insurance market and regulators the ability with more transparent, quicker data. So with that, we'll move kind of into, I know we've thrown a lot of information, a lot of you guys that especially that haven't been around since the first design thinking session. So I'm going to open it up for does anyone have any particular questions or anything we can address now? And then, you know, obviously we want to look forward to being able to work with you more individually on your interface, so that you can start to get a comfort level with what you would be doing from your side on not just this call, but on going forward.
Robin, it's George. How you doing?
Hey, good.
Hey, I wanted to ask you, where do we stand with some of the other companies, Tokyo Marine, AIG, Chubb? Have there been any further conversations with them? Can some of the states that might have jurisdiction reach out to them? You know, what do we know about what's going on there?
Yeah. Truman, I'm going to let you kind of approach this because you're more on the company side, but and right now, I don't want to jinx us, but we are making good progress in State Farm. We don't have a yes, we'll do this from State Farm, but they haven't closed the door in our face, and they are still talking to us about the magnitude, about what this is, about what it would mean to their organization. And those are really good conversations that are going on now. We appreciate them, taking the time. They are exploring. Let's just, so even though we got to know, no thanks, we don't want to do this right now. They have not pushed us out of the door and said, no way, no how, not ever. That's not what we're getting from them. I'm encouraged. I think it's pretty positive. I don't want to move that from the regulatory perspective right now, because I don't want to scare them. This is going okay with them. They're big, so it's going to take a little bit. But Truman, I'll let you speak to maybe Nationwide and some of the other companies that our president is certainly in the discussions with right now to move forward.
Yeah, so George, the short answer to your question is yes, absolutely. We can reach out to companies that would be of interest, generally speaking, or to your state in particular, that would provide that perspective, because it does vary state by state. We are talking with companies of all shapes and sizes, and they all can participate, in order to fulfill this particular role. Each one of them has a different relationship, and I'll kind of give it the general sense. There's four, in addition to, kind of the C-suite, this does wind up going into the CEO, the president's office, oftentimes because of the many notes that it hits. So there is an executive's perspective on this, but we need champions in a couple of different areas of the organization. Compliance, obviously, finance, underwriting, because this is an advisory relationship, product relationship, as well as data, right? So those are the things that we need to make sure we have relationships with. Each of those areas needs to have a solid understanding before we can get to a let's try, and that's even a yes. So it is a bit of a long road, but once we're able to get there and we get the necessary understanding, we're able to move fairly quickly. And then at that point, it really starts to move as fast as it can in order to do the requisite diligence. So yes, what I'd like to do is, and this is part of our follow-ups with each of you, is let's look at each of the the players in your states. We've got the list we can share that are kind of the top 20 and the kind of the horizontal slices of where we might find the most bang for those new relationships. Again, Nationwide, Chubb. There's a lot of other companies that are in there. AIG, specifically in the Lexington organization. We are making our way through those organizations, and Ed is reaching out to each of those organizations. I think we've got 20 or 40 identified. He's reaching out as high as he can into those organizations, and we're looking to align all of the multitude of contacts we have within those organizations, as well as those align with you. So let's look at each of those, where those contacts are, what are the important ones, and how we can triangulate, because it is a it's holding water in your hands and trying to bring it to the bucket,
So, Truman, George, I think what we can do is, because we've got more than one conversation going on across the country, some of them into kind of that last, we think we're in the last phases of a yes, we'll try. We've produced kind of a bit of a spreadsheet for some of the interactions. So let us update that to where we are at the end of this week, and plan to get that out to the participating states, just so you know, all the people we've talked to as far as states, or excuse me, as far as companies, and the who we've talked to inside of the organizations, and then we can have a more detailed conversation. But we have a lot kind of in the plate, and our CEO is really pushing and helping us try to get into the upper levels, which ultimately people have to decide it's a strategic move for them, and that has to come in the C-suite. So let us get that spreadsheet up to date and out to you by the end of the week, so you can see the companies we have had contacts with, where we are at in those discussions, and who we are talking to.
And I just wanted to throw out Maryland's Commissioner Baran has actually, we did send her that spreadsheet a couple weeks ago, and she's been reaching out to some of the carriers as well. So I'll get an update from her as to where, and I don't know if the folks from Maryland on the call have any updates for us on that, but I know she has been reaching out to several carriers.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Any other questions from the group?
Thanks very much. And again, please shout if we can help at all, and let us know to, again, anything we can do, and both on getting more folks into the system, as well as helping you understand how to leverage it.
So I had a question for y'all, just to throw out there, because when we initially started, we had agreed to meet like once a month as a group. Do you all still feel like you want to do that as a group, get together just briefly to get updates, or how do you want to proceed with getting the updates or meeting? I know we're going to be meeting individually, but I know, Chris, that was on our original timeline, or our original information that we sent. So I wanted to get your all's feedback on that. And then I would like you all just to kind of tell us, since we met with you individually, how you think that went, and any feedback you might want to provide.
This is George. My thoughts are, I would still like to have the monthly meetings. I think it's good just to keep up to date with what's going on. But that would be my feedback.
This is Chris. I would agree with George. I think the once a month is fine. It's good to get the updates. As far as the feedback as the individual, I think the website's pretty intuitive. Can't really do much right now until we actually get data in there, which obviously you guys know. So I'm just kind of waiting for that.
Yeah, California's fine with the monthly meetings as well. Thank you.
Okay, then it looks like the consensus is to continue, so I'll get those set up. Are Tuesdays good for most of your calendars, I'm assuming? It looks like this time worked for everybody. I know right now everyone's scrambling, and some folks were back in the office and now back working from home, and some are still working from home. So I'll just try and work with your schedules, and if we have any conflicts, you can let me know. But I will be reaching out to all of you again to set up individual meetings, probably looking at around the first week in August. Give Truman some time to get some of the stuff built out.
Yeah, I'm not sure when the NAIC, we're going to be doing our summer meeting through webinar over a 2-week period. Chris, do you know what the dates are for that?
I think, George, that does start the last week in July and the first week, I think through August 4th, I saw. So that's why I was thinking of trying to push these meetings out after that.
Yep,
That's perfect.
That's right. Yeah. And I think they're all pretty spread out for when meetings are happening. I think it's from like 2 to 3 Central Time. So I think, yeah, that's all.
We'll look at that and then we'll plan accordingly. Hopefully we'll have even, greater news in the next one. I always get a little discouraged because I want it yesterday, and I think some of you guys want it yesterday too. But to be where we are is pretty spectacular in and of itself. I also want to give a quick update, and I know that some of you are probably aware. We have always made a commitment at AIS to open source and to. This is not going to be a cost or a profit center for our group. And we do continue to the discussions to move the technology into the Linux Foundation, which will give you an opportunity as states to be members of the actual project. Right now, the proposed fee schedule would be, would be for not-for-profits and government agencies. There's no financial contribution, but certainly that would just allow. So if as we go through and we prove this works, then if under that foundation, under the project under the Linux Foundation, if you were interested in moving forward with life and health information, with other types of information, maybe the financial statement information, those can all move forward much more expansively than what AIS could host in and of itself as an advisory organization. We're still very committed. We will be there. We will continue the regulatory reporting part of the project, but that will give the opportunity. And we're still in negotiations for that, in the sense that it's not about money. It's not about money transferring hands. It's us handing over about $3 million worth of development work and how we structure it properly so that it can do all those things in the future. And that just takes a little time to work through with the foundation. But we are working toward that open source. So this technology will be free to do some pretty incredible things in the insurance industry as a whole. Okay, with that, I think we're good for the day. And again, I think we're giving you some time back, so you have the gift of time. We certainly appreciate all of your participation. Thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to prove this works. We're still every day is proving out the technology. It's moving this one step forward. And it's pretty exciting for us, and I hope for you guys as well. So you guys have a really great rest of the afternoon.